How do the lives and works of two American literary giants, Ernest Hemingway and Hart Crane, inspire author JA Wainwright? Let's find out. Hi, my name is Crystal Fletcher, and welcome to All About Books. If you love books, then you've come to the right channel because you get to meet the author as well as find out what inspired them to write their novel. Today, I'm delighted to have author JA Wainwright with me. Andrew is the author of 5 books of poetry, 5 novels, and 2 critical biographies. His latest novel, This Cleaving and This Burning, was published by Guernica Editions, and it's a prize winner. So you can hear a little bit about what his book is about. I'll read from the back jacket. Two unrelated, aspiring writers, born on the same day in the same year to parents with the same first names, grow up together and eventually gain national prominence as authors. As the years pass, the complex sexual identities of Miller Stark and Hal Pierce undermine their intense private relationships, inflicting damage that cannot be undone by the distinction of their fiction and poetry. Inspired by the lives and works of American literary giants Ernest Hemingway and Hart Crane, This Cleaving and This Burning reveals the passion and purpose behind masks of public reputation and creative expression. Welcome to All About Books, Andrew.
Thank you, Crystal.
Andrew, did you always want to be a writer?
No, I think I became a writer in my third year of university at the University of Toronto when I, met an extraordinary group of people who were, like myself, starting out with poetry and short fiction. We edited the the college literary magazine together, and I learned from them how to write poetry, and along with the reading that I did, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And they went on to do, they're very well-known people today. Some of them, one of them won the Governor General's Award in 1995. Another is a very well-known nonfiction writer. So.
Oh, that's incredible. And you'd mentioned that the two literary giants, Hemingway and Crane, were the inspiration behind this novel. So what kind of triggered this for you, this inspiration?
Well, when I was at university after my undergraduate years, I was reading Hemingway and reading Crane and being enamored with their works. And I wrote a master's thesis on Ernest Hemingway, so I knew his work really well. And I wrote about Hart Crane as well, and had things published about both authors. But it was only a few years ago. We're talking, 40 years ago, 50 years ago now. But it was only a few years ago that I discovered what doesn't seem to be mentioned by anybody in American literature, or literature for that matter, that they were born on the same day, July 21st, 1899, to parents with the same first names. Their mothers went to the same high school together. On the last day of Hart Crane's life on this earth, before he jumped overboard on a ship in the Gulf of Mexico, he was in Havana, Cuba. Ernest Hemingway was also in the city that night. And they both, of course, ended up committing suicide. So the congruities between their lives is extraordinary. So I didn't make that up, that copy on the back cover. That's who they were. And I thought it would be really interesting to, they would not have, in my opinion, they would not have liked one another. Hemingway was hyper-masculine, wrote clean, precise prose. Hart Crane was a conflicted homosexual who was a symbolist poet, very metaphoric in his use of language. I just don't think they would have gotten on. But I thought, well, what if I wrote a book in which these two characters did get on?
Yeah.
So it's not a romantic play. It's not a novel that's designed to say, okay, this is Ernest Hemingway and this is Hart Crane. That's my taking off point. The rest is fiction.
Right. So in Miller, Clark, and Hal Pierce, you have two very distinct voices. And I mean, immediately that's evident when you kick off that first chapter when the two friends are hunting in the woods. And I won't give anything away, but I will say that, you know, one is certainly more comfortable to have a gun in his hand. um, which character did you find more challenging to write?
That's a very interesting question. Well, because I wasn't writing biographically, although there are biographical elements that come into it from Hemingway's life and Crane's life, um, I found both of them interesting to write and not too difficult, but challenging. Um, Hemingway, people take Hemingway for granted far too often that he was just, as I said, this hyper-masculine character with the big fists and the big gun and so on. And then they would think if they knew Hart Crane as well, and I don't think Hart Crane is known nearly as well as Ernest Hemingway in general cultural ways, let alone American culture. But he's a much more gentle soul, the
Yeah.
character of Hal Pierce, and I found I had to fill in a lot more of Hal's character because I knew so much about Hemingway's life, and there have been so many things written on him.
Yeah. And actually, that's a segue into my next question. So you would say that you felt perhaps a little closer to Hal than you did to Miller.
Yeah, again, that's interesting. It's I felt more sympathy for Hal,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
because Miller's full of bluster, but Miller also is very strong. He can take care of himself. If you
Yes.
were in a dark alley, you'd want him at your back. But if you
Yeah.
were out in the woods, you want him at your back. But yeah, Hal was much more conflicted than Miller. Miller's difficulties in the novel come through flashbacks and dreams.
Yes.
Hal's come through actual lived experience, daily lived experience. So he struggles much more to find his feet.
Yeah. And I'd have to say, I mean, you tackle war. So you take Miller to war and just these very graphic battle scenes. And I was so touched when we've got, you know, Miller out in the field and guns are going off and he looks down and he sees the slug, the snail on his hand.
Right.
And I just was wondering, Andrew, was this something that you had planned to insert at the time, or was it the creative muses that came through and when you were writing that particular
No, I
section?
think it was the creative moment.
Oh,
It just
yeah.
I just saw the slug like you did. Suddenly
Yeah.
it was there.
Yeah, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh, it
But
was,
it's interesting because I've never forgotten that either. It still haunts me that scene.
yeah, it really, me as well, me as well. Um, just looking down here. So, Andrew, would it be okay if you read a section from your novel?
Sure, I'd like to.
And before you begin, could you just tell us why you've chosen this particular section?
Well, it's the opening section of the novel. There's a very short prologue piece, and then there's the opening section, in which establishes the relationship between Miller and Hal. And they're out in the woods in northern Michigan, hunting and fishing, and they shoot a bear.
Yes.
And this is about the bond between them over that act, but also the difficulties that the relationship is going to have. It portends those difficulties.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
He giggled nervously as they crept along the edge of the meadow, just inside the tree line. Miller's lever action 30-30 clutched tightly in his hands, the sun warm in his cheeks and the sound of the shallow creek blending with the bird song. Shut up, Miller whispered fiercely. You'll scare him. The bear was about 200 yards away, chewing on the spring grass. Occasionally it raised its head and sniffed the air. Casually it seemed as if it had nothing to fear. But they were upwind and froze when it broke off from its meal to look around. So the only betrayal from Miller's point of view would be Hal's stifled laughter. Where the trees began to thin out, Miller, who was in front, raised his hand to signal this was the place. Rest the barrel on a branch, he said, and remember, don't jerk the trigger. Hal had never planned to be the shooter when his friend spotted the bear in the flat land beyond the junction of 3 streams where they emptied into the river. All he had killed were pigeons in the Sark barn with a .22 and the occasional squirrel with Miller in the woods. But this morning Miller insisted they had to bag some big game, and he had to admit more than a mild curiosity as to what that would be like. Have you ever shot one? Sure, in the spring they hang around the cottage looking for garbage. They'll get right up on the porch if you don't deal with them. How do you think I learned to use the gun? Hal didn't know whether to believe this, but told himself that Miller would never have passed up the chance to bring down this animal if he hadn't killed such a creature before. He knelt beside a tamarack, feeling his knees pressed into the soft earth, and found a bowl protruding far enough for a rest. The bear was less than 100 yards away, its flank exposed and glistening in the sun. He sighted down the barrel and was amazed at the bulk in front of him. He could see the flank moving in and out with every breath. When he squeezed the trigger and heard the report a split second later, the bear grunted and lurched sideways. Hit him again, Miller yelled, as he levered out the shell and slammed a new cartridge into the chamber. But the bear was lumbering off now across the meadow toward a distant hill. Hal felt sick as he watched it drag its hind leg where the slug had ripped into muscle and tendons. He hadn't even been able to hit it properly, and he didn't want to hurt it anymore. Give me the gun, Miller cried, grabbing at the stock. By the time Hal released it and his friend raised the rifle to his shoulder, the animal had dropped into a gully on the meadow's edge. Miller waited calmly for it to emerge and put a bullet in its spine as it climbed the last few yards to safety. I hate tracking when you've blown a shot, he said. Hal knew the comment wasn't personal, but also that Miller never missed. When they came up to the carcass, Miller cut a claw out from one large paw, tossed it to Hal, and pressed his fingers into the shining pelt. It'll make a great rug, he said, and added nonchalantly, you lifted your arm. That's why you hit him where you did. Hal crushed the claw inside his fist. Just then he hated his friend, hated and loved him. That's it.
Oh,
Did you get that, Crystal?
I did. It just paused for a second. That's Andrew. That's incredible. And that opening scene was also another scene that really stuck with me as well. Yeah.
And of course, the bear comes back into the novel many times.
Yes, he does. I won't give it away.
Yeah.
Now, when you were writing your novel, Andrew, you know, you've got the narrative of the two friends. Did you write one of their stories all the way through and then interject them together, or how did you structure when you were writing?
No, they were born on the same day in the same year, so I had to write them at the same time. No, the story just began and flowed through with. I went back and forth between them in chapters, of course, but I always had in mind what one was doing while the other was on the page, so to speak.
Oh, that's incredible. And you never confuse their voices. Like that's incredible. Yeah.
Well, they're two very distinct voices, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what are you currently working on?
I've just finished another novel. It's still in working towards its final form.
Oh,
It's called The Blind Viper. It's about a painter, a blind painter.
oh, okay. That's excellent. So how far along? You said you're just finished, so
Yeah.
go, yeah. And do you have a few readers that you work with, Drew, or?
No, not when I'm first writing a novel. I mean, not until I get involved with a publisher.
Right.
And but I do have people that will look at various aspects of the novel while it's in progress.
Okay. Well, I'll look forward to reading your next novel because I enjoyed this Cleaving and this Burning so much. It's a beautiful novel. And
Thank you.
I would like to give you a great big thank you for being on All About Books today and talking about your novel. If you'd like more information about Andrew, I'll put links down below and where you can learn more about him and also purchase a copy of his novel. So for everyone else, please subscribe to my channel and be sure to like my videos and come back next Tuesday because we'll have another author and we'll find out what inspires them. Thank you for listening.